Thanks, Deirdre. My name is Colleen Dixon. I got married on the weekend, so most of you know me as Colleen Yates, but now I am Colleen Dixon. And I am the field coordinator for product care, and we are sponsoring this session. We have three speakers. The first is Bennett. She's a senior waste management coordinator with the Waste Stewardship Unit of the Ministry of Environment. She's worked in Saskatchewan's waste management industry since graduating with a master's degree in sustainable environmental management from the University of Saskatchewan in 2010. Next, we'll have Jay Illingworth. He's got more than 25 years of experience in developing effective public-private partnerships. His background crosses a wide range of technology-based initiatives for both government and industry. He's been the Director of Harmonization for Electronics Product Stewardship Association since 2009. He has led the development of the industry's performance measurement framework and revitalized their work on setting and tracking environmental handbooks. And finally, we have Ghani. He is the sanitation manager for the City of Prince Albert. In addition to his regular duties, he emphasizes waste diversion and public education. Nizar helped establish the first ever repair cafe in PA. He is a civil engineer by training whose career path changed with the trip to the dump in Manila, Philippines, where he observed a very poor state of garbage and people living in the dump and decided to work for a better environment. So I think with that, we will turn it over to Bree to start us off.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Colleen. I will just share my screen. Congratulations on getting married this weekend.
Well, thank you.
Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
So, all right, hopefully I remember to switch slides when I'm done. So, as Colleen said, my name is Bennett. I'm a senior waste management coordinator with the Ministry of Environment in Saskatchewan. And I'm very excited to share some updates from our ministry with you today. So this afternoon, I'll provide a brief introduction to Saskatchewan's solid waste management strategy. I will discuss our regulated stewardship programs and focus on our newest household hazardous waste regulations. So a little bit about the Saskatchewan solid waste management strategy. Saskatchewan produces the second highest amount of waste per person in Canada. Every year we generate over 840 kilograms per person, which is roughly the weight of 60 regular, large 75-liter bags of garbage per person. Obviously, discarding waste in a landfill should always be a last resort, as it can increase the risk of water pollution, soil contamination, greenhouse gas emissions, and impacts to human health. However, landfills still represent an important infrastructure for materials that cannot be reused or recycled or repurposed. So to promote the sustainable operation of landfills, it's necessary to ensure that the regulatory requirements are clear, focused on achieving desired environmental outcomes, and that also recognize the diversity of Saskatchewan's environment and the needs of our residents. So the Ministry of Environment released a solid waste management strategy in January of this year to address these ongoing challenges of waste management and to identify opportunities to reduce our waste in the province. It supports the goals of the new Saskatchewan Growth Plan, as well as the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment's Zero Plastic Waste Strategy. So based on the public engagement that was carried out in 2017 and the work of a solid waste management advisory committee that was established in 2018, we developed a vision, targets, and key themes to help us reach our goals in the strategy. And this vision is working together to create a practical, sustainable, integrated solid waste management system that protects the environment and promotes economic development and innovation opportunities. A little background about the current state of landfills in Saskatchewan. Most of our waste ends up in one of our 203 landfills. 186 of these are managed by municipalities, and 17 are industrial or private landfills. Over the past 5 years, we have decreased the number of landfills in Saskatchewan by over 60% from the 500 landfills that we had in 2015. And part of this is due to municipalities recognizing that it's more efficient to share the cost of managing a landfill with neighboring communities, and then have formed regional landfills and regional waste management authorities. Many of these communities also utilize transfer stations to temporarily store their waste until it's transferred to a regional landfill. Regardless of the number of landfills we have, it's important that all of our operating landfills are still compliant with provincial regulations in order to protect human health and our environment. So a little bit about the challenges of waste management in Saskatchewan. When it comes to responsible waste management, we have a number of challenges. Publicly, there may be little knowledge about the risk of improper waste management and the costs associated with managing waste responsibly. Currently, a number of municipalities do not have the financial means to manage a landfill responsibly. And so if the true cost of waste is not considered, landfilling can seem like a cheaper option than recycling, but this is often at the expense of the environment and human health. So not only does improper disposal increase the risk of soil and water pollution, it undermines the economics and profitability of recycling. Saskatchewan's geography is also unique. Northern and remote communities have really long haul distances, and that can result in limited access to regional landfills and a lot of the recycling opportunities that are available in the southern part of Saskatchewan. Like other provinces, we are impacted by the global market. Consumer trends result in internationally sourced products and packaging that end up being really difficult to recycle in Canada or are just not recyclable in Canada. Since the closure of China's commodity markets for recyclables in 2018, recycling programs in Saskatchewan, especially for plastics, have faced a number of challenges in the last couple of years. Additionally, high volumes of waste that are not regulated by some of our recycling programs are still ending up in our landfills, especially organic waste, construction and demolition waste, and waste from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. Those areas make up a large portion of our waste. Saskatchewan also lacks reliable baseline data to help us develop and improve waste management practices and gauge the success of our current diversion efforts. So as I mentioned previously, the ministry sought feedback in 2017 from individuals, municipalities, First Nations, manufacturers, landfill operators, academia, recycling organizations. We had a lot of consultation efforts in 2017. We provided a discussion paper online, a survey, in-person engagement sessions, and we received a number of written submissions as well. Additionally, we established a solid waste management advisory committee in 2018, which is a group made up of municipal and industry leaders with an understanding of waste management challenges in the province. The committee led further consultation efforts in 2018 and then provided recommendations for the ministry to consider when developing the strategy. So in the strategy, we commit to reducing waste generated per person by 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2040 from 2014 baseline levels. These targets are directly drawn from the CCME's strategy on zero plastic waste, which recognizes waste as a global environmental priority. It also outlines a vision to keep plastic waste in the economy and out of the environment. So we are working very closely with the CCME on this, and we are co-leading 2 items in the zero plastic waste strategy. One item is on extended producer responsibility, and the other is on single-use and disposable plastics. So how will we achieve these ambitious targets? With dedicated effort and collaboration. We have a number of commitments outlined in each of our 6 goals. So I'll go through those goals briefly and maybe highlight a couple of the commitments. But this is available on our website right now, and it goes into each of the goals and commitments in a little bit more detail. We want to enhance education, awareness, and technical understanding of waste management best practices and the risks associated with improper practices. We want to encourage regional collaboration. We want to provide modern, efficient, and effective regulatory system for waste disposal. For example, we recently finalized and released a large-scale composting guidance document that is also available on our website. And we would like to routinely review the municipal refuse management regulations and make sure that they're updated for Saskatchewan. The fourth goal is to enhance waste diversion across Saskatchewan. So this is things like reviewing all of our existing waste diversion programs and engaging with stakeholders to identify how we can improve the programs and regulations, and trying to enhance accessibility in northern and remote regions. Again, this is just a little taste of everything that's in the strategy. The fifth one is to foster innovative and sustainable solutions to manage waste. And then the sixth is to demonstrate government leadership in waste management. So in terms of next steps, with the launch of the strategy, we will now move toward action and application of these commitments. A number of them will be actioned immediately, and many will actually require a lot more consultation and engagement with stakeholders and the public and other representative groups. We've committed to we will review and report on the strategy annually, and then review it every 5 years again to ensure it's still relevant and effective. So just a little bit about our EPR programs, our extended producer responsibility programs. We have programs for used oil and antifreeze, which is run by SARC with 2 Rs, scrap tires, which is managed by Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan, waste paint is managed by Product Care, electronics is through the Electronic Products Recycling Association, and Jay is going to be talking a little bit more, I think, about that next. We have the Household Packaging and Paper program, which is managed by Multi-Material Stewardship Western, and then the Agricultural Packaging program for grain bags, which is managed by Clean Farms. We've also recently released a regulation for household hazardous waste, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a couple minutes. Although not technically an EPR program, we also have a system in place for the collection and recycling of non-refillable beverage containers. This is operated by Sarcan Recycling, and it's operated through a contract with the Saskatchewan government, and it utilizes both environmental handling charges and refundable deposits for this program. It's a very successful program. Last year, we had more than 450 million beverage containers recycled through Sarcan, and that recovery rate is 87%, which is one of the highest recovery rates in North America. They also have their new drop and go system, which I believe they've talked about before. You can drop off your containers, take your bags, and then just leave them. And you can get paid through PayPal, you can pick up a check, or you can donate your refunds to a bottle drive or a charity. So that is especially effective right now during all this COVID stuff. You can just drop them off and you don't have to wait in line. Sarcan are also collection points for some of our other programs, like the electronics recycling program and the waste paint program. So a little bit about the HHW regulations. We did quite a bit of consultation, and then we released the regulations in June of 2019. So the program requires first sellers of HHW products to manage and fund the collection, treatment, safe disposal, recycling, or reuse of HHW products. After the release of the regulations, stewards had 180 days to submit a product stewardship plan, or PSP, which was due in December 2019. And then the ministry has approved 2 plans, and I'll discuss these details in just a moment. So a little bit of highlights about the regulations. They are similar to our other stewardship regulations in that there's a requirement for the creation of an advisory committee to ensure representation of Saskatchewan interests. The program operators will be required to develop public awareness and communication strategies, and will have to develop a plan that outlines how they will manage greenhouse gas emissions related to collection and transportation and final treatment of HHW products. They're also required to submit an annual report, in which they need to report the types and amount of each category of HHW product collected, the total amount of recycling fees collected, the amount spent to operate the program, and the amount spent on public education and awareness. So this and other stewardship program plans will be reviewed every 5 years to make sure that they are still effective and that there is public consultation undertaken to make sure that the stewards are comfortable with the program. So in terms of what products are defined in the regulations, there are 3 categories: waste, household hazardous materials, pesticides, and batteries. Now, waste household hazardous materials are defined by the CSA standard and include flammable materials like barbecue lighter fluid, paint stripper, gasoline, corrosive materials like rust remover or grout remover, physically hazardous materials including explosive materials like non-refillable propane tanks, but not including ammunition, toxic materials like automotive additives and mineral spirits, and things that are environmentally hazardous, so materials that are toxic and either persistent or bioaccumulative in the environment. So pesticides are defined through the Federal Pest Control Products Act, and they are domestic pesticides, so use in your own personal backyard, and they display the poison symbol combined with the words danger, warning, or caution, and then has the skull and crossbones on it. And then finally, batteries includes rechargeable and non-rechargeable batteries, but does not include lead acid batteries at this time. So a little bit about the products that are not included. Right now, light bulbs are not included in the program. We've noticed that the sale of CFL bulbs has declined dramatically over the past several years, and a large majority of the lamps collected in other jurisdictions are linear fluorescent bulbs, which are primarily used in the IC&I sector. So we believe that Saskatchewan needs a little bit more stakeholder consultation with this sector before we can consider regulating light bulbs as part of this program or their own program. We're also working with Environment and Climate Change Canada on a national strategy for lamps containing mercury. Pharmaceuticals are not included in this program. The Pharmacy Association of Saskatchewan has a voluntary program where you can return pharmaceuticals at most pharmacies. Sharps are also not included in this at this time. There's a few drop-off locations around the province that you can take sharps to. And then lead acid batteries have their own program through the Canadian Battery Association. So finally, a little bit about the stewardship programs that have applied for the HHW regulation. They were submitted in December last year as required by the regulation. And this is the first regulation that will have multiple program operators, which results in multiple programs. So Product Care submitted a plan for waste household hazardous material. It was approved in June 2020, so very, very newly approved program. They plan on establishing just under 20 permanent depots around the province, and these can be established by local governments or organizations and private entities through contracts with Product Care. And while these depots are being established, they will be assisting in funding some HHW collection events in communities that have hosted them in the past. And so this will likely begin in spring, summer 2021. They will begin implementation. So it'll take some time for the full program to be established, but they will begin implementing next year. And then the second program that was approved is Call to Recycle's plan for household consumer batteries. It was approved in April, and through their existing voluntary program, they maintain a network of more than 190 drop-off locations, and so they plan to expand that to be bigger than it currently is. And they want to increase accessibility to the public. So this will include, and currently includes, retailers, businesses, institutions, government entities, that kind of thing. And then they have proposed that the official regulated program and associated environmental handling fees will begin on January 1st of 2021. So that concludes my presentation. So I believe the question period is saved for after the other two presenters have completed their presentations.
Yeah, that's correct. And I am monitoring the chat box, so we'll make sure we get to everyone's questions. But we'll pass it over now to Jay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Colleen, and a big thank you to Joanne for having me here and having me be able to present. I think I've presented a few times at SWRC over the years. That's what happens when you've been in this industry since dinosaurs roamed the earth. So hopefully everybody can see my presentation window. What I want to do today is just walk you through a couple of things, provide some background on EPRA and our consumer-facing brand, which is Recycle My Electronics. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges and what we've been facing under the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a lot of the programs have been faced with challenges, and just give you a little bit of perspective on what we've gone through. And talk about a new outreach campaign that we're launching. And then really, I think the heart of the matter that Joe wanted me to talk about were the key elements of what our industry sees as key for harmonization and why harmonization is a good thing. And then just end with a reference to our annual report, and then as Bree said, the Q&A at the end. I would like to just first of all acknowledge that Ghani Creelman is our director on the ground there in Saskatoon, and has been running the program for us for a number of years. And I know most of you folks will have either met Galen or know of her. So if any really hard questions about the Saskatchewan program come up, I'm going to definitely let Galen handle those. But I am the national guy. I'm based here in Ottawa. It's humid and sticky in Ottawa, as it always is. So hope you guys are having a good prairie summer out there. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we've been really benefited through not only working closely with the Ministry of Environment in Saskatchewan, so Bree, Brady, Shelley, those folks have been excellent to work with. I work with regulators right across Canada, and I can say that those folks are right at the top of the heap and have been excellent in terms of keeping us on our toes and helping us run an effective industry-led program. And then also we have a local advisory committee in Saskatchewan, and Daniel and Anne from our local advisory committee I know are in the room, and big shout out to them too. So some folks may know about EPRA. We are a bit of a unique animal, I guess. We're an industry-led not-for-profit, and we run programs right across Canada that ensures that end-of-life electronics are handled right here in Canada in a safe, secure, and environmentally sound manner. We are all about environmental compliance and regulatory compliance, and we've been doing this for some time. And I think probably if you folks have heard me speak before, you'll also know that Saskatchewan was really a pioneering program, not just in Canada, but in North America. The former SWEEP program in Saskatchewan, which launched in February 2007, was North America's first industry-led extended producer responsibility program for end-of-life electronics. Both Alberta and California had launched already by that time, but I would classify those programs as kind of quasi-governmental. This is true EPR, and so that, Saskatchewan really was the first out of the gate. And you can see by that timeline at the bottom of the slide, in the 10 years that preceded that, we had a lot of work to do in terms of getting other provinces on board right across the country. And in fact, you could even add to that while we don't run the program in the Yukon, we do provide some of their back office support and steward registration and that sort of thing. So we do have programs right across Canada, and really proud of what we've been able to build in, I think, a relatively short time. So, a big message that I want to make sure that you folks have clearly is that, and I think it fits into some of the nomenclature that's been talked about recently around circular economy, is that electronics are full of resources. So there's glass, there's plastic, gold, silver, copper, lots of stuff that can be recovered and can be recovered quite effectively and put back into the manufacturing supply chain. And we've been doing that really right from the beginning, right from the time that we launched in Saskatchewan in 2007, right up today and moving forward. I think we'll have an ongoing challenge of trying to extract more resources out of those electronics. There's rare earth metals, for example, that are in there that are not easy to get to, but we're going to be working with our processors and other partners to make sure that we are focusing on those. And, the more that we can do that, the better it is to reduce our carbon footprint and lessen dependence on traditional mining. So, what we're trying to do through this program is, first of all, make sure that those resources are recovered. Make sure that nothing is being shipped illegally. There are nations that don't share the same environmental health and safety rules that we have when it comes to processing electronics. So we want to make sure that we do try to process as much stuff as we can right here in Canada. We want to make sure that we're protecting your data. Almost all the devices today have personal data on them. We want to make sure that we're protecting that data, wiping it, and not letting anyone that shouldn't get a hold of it get a hold of it. We want to protect the health and safety of the workers that are working on it. Once you get into shredding and some of the more sophisticated processing of our devices, you can actually there are risks and hazards, and we want to make sure that those are handled. So I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. And then, of course, we don't want stuff going to landfill. We just think that's a waste, and so we've done a good job in terms of diverting it from landfill. So last year, you may have heard that our programs, our family of programs, dating back to all the way back to that launch in Saskatchewan in February of 2007, right up till into 2019, we surpassed the 1 million tons of end-of-life electronics being collected and recycled responsibly by our program. So that's quite a milestone. You always wonder what 1 million tons of electronics would look like. Well, here's one analogy. It's that it would fill a row of pickup trucks stretching from Vancouver to St. John's and then back again. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that shouldn't go to landfill and should be recycled responsibly. So we're pretty proud of that metric. A couple of other things that we, above and beyond the weight-based collection numbers, we also take a look at accessibility and awareness. And so accessibility, we've now built a network of over 2,500 authorized drop-off locations right across the country. And it's a real hybrid. It's working with really great local partners like Sarcan in Saskatchewan and the Depot network that Sarcan does such a great job of running, but also return to retail, municipalities, any number of entities that want to help and be responsible in terms of collecting electronics from Canadians will want to work with them. So, about almost 100%, 90%, 97% of the Canadian population is within what we see as a reasonable zone, which is within 30-minute drive or 25 kilometers of one of our drop-off centers. And then the other thing is, of course, you got to let people know you're out there. And so across the board, we're looking at about 78% of the Canadian population are aware that there is a industry-led e-recycling program in their province, and that they can take it to somewhere local, and with the assurance that their devices are going to be responsibly recycled. So we're proud of that. We spend a lot of time in terms of outreach to make sure that the communities are aware of it, and it's an important metric for us. I won't spend too much time on this, but if folks get the Canadian Stewardship Gazette in the June edition, we had an article which really talked about how EPRA was able to continue to serve our communities where we could and where officials allowed us to through the pandemic. It hasn't been an easy period for anybody, that's for sure. But we have made investments so that whether it be paying contractors or working with our stewards, we wanted to make sure that we had business continuity, and I think we did a good job on that. And as I said, you can read the Stewardship Gazette article to get a little bit more perspective. But it's been a challenge, I think, right across the board. But really proud about how our program and our executive team has been able to kind of keep things moving forward. One of the things that we've done is we're going to be launching a new awareness campaign about what's inside counts. And I think a couple of the main messages here are, first of all, that there are really valuable resources in that device that you're holding in your hands. Don't throw it out. Don't let it sit in a drawer. Bring it in. Let us recycle it properly, responsibly, and let's put those resources back into the supply chain and back into the economy. And so that's a campaign that you'll see. You'll probably see some billboards and some electronic media on that, and we'll be promoting that forward. So that's and that's our consumer brand. Recycle My Electronics is the brand that we use to talk to Canadians about the call to action in terms of bringing in their electronics. EPRA is the corporate entity. So harmonization. So, you know, as the director of harmonization, which is a truly Canadian title, I haven't met many other directors of harmonization in other countries. The issue, as you know, is that waste management and is a provincial and territorial responsibility, and so really it's within the responsibility of industry to make sure that we are trying to provide a harmonized program to our stewards. That being said, I think there's some things that working with our stakeholder community, which could include regulators and municipalities, service providers, etc., our processors, that we want to just keep an eye on. And I think if we can get these 5 things right, and I think we have, I'm open to feedback during the Q&A period, if we can get these 5 things right, that we can really run a harmonized program that isn't just good for the national brand owners, but really is good at the local level too, because I think some of the economies of scale do filter down and make for better programs right across the board. So let me get into these 5 right away. The first one is regulated devices, and sorry for the resolution on this, but this is a snapshot of the devices that under Gayleen's program in Saskatchewan, consumers can take back. And so we've had a kind of a phased approach to how we've done this right across the board. So we started with the basic stuff, computers, printers, and TVs. Those were the items that were most often going to be the ones ending up in landfill. And so those were the items that we focused in at the beginning. Then the regulations came through and asked for an enhanced sort of approach to other devices, and that's where we got audio-video devices added to the list. So things like your VCRs, your home theater in a box, your audio-video for not only vehicles and home, but even personal audio-video, they got added to the list, and we moved that forward as phase 2. And then the most recent expansion in Saskatchewan really saw us starting to fill in some of the gaps of some of the things that were problematic that municipalities and consumers and others asked us to collect. And that was things like microwave ovens, like video gaming systems, global positioning systems, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we're calling phase 3. And, you know, Saskatchewan, I think, is one of our most advanced provinces in terms of the breadth of devices that are collected. This now is also, this list is also replicated in provinces like Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. Manitoba has a very similar list. British Columbia is well ahead of this in terms that they are also collecting medical devices and children's toys and basically everything with a plug and a battery. I think the incremental approach that we've seen in provinces like Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, and PEI has been the right approach. We're still wrestling with some of those more tricky sectors, I'll call them, in British Columbia. But eventually, I think we will be headed there. And I'll give you a snapshot of exactly what this is. And this is a slide that the Sustainability Consortium in the US put together. That's a very interesting group with a couple of major American universities and folks like Walmart and some other big corporations behind it. And they did some research on, okay, what's the next wave of electronics looking like? So, you know, in the beginning, there were the devices that I think I talked about, the televisions, the printers, you know, your desktop computer systems, your cameras, that sort of thing, even telephones. And then, you know, probably in the late 80s and through the 90s, we started getting into flat panels and cellular phones and laptops as opposed to some of the larger things. So you'll see that the weight profile has reduced in terms, and also there's been consolidation the cell phone takes care of your camera and a bunch of other things. And then finally, you know, the next wave is really going to be everything from drones to toys to wearable electronics, vehicle audio. We're even seeing the small appliances starting to come through, and we've recognized that. So what you're seeing is an evolution in electronic devices, and I can't even guess where we're going to go into the next phase. But I will say that what's happened is product weight, product size, and even the precious metal content has dropped. I don't know if you can see the arrow there on the left. At the same side, on the other side, the diversity of products, the integration of the components, and the amount of personally identifiable information has all increased. And this is going to be this has been and will be a real challenge for us as we continue to expand and look at collecting more and more of these devices as they do get regulated under the provincial EPR programs. So it's just an interesting challenge that we're going to look at. So that's why it's really important for us to look at the advent of regulated devices and trying to harmonize that as much as we can. I'll talk a little bit now about standards for processing. And here we're talking about the electronics recycling standards. So one of the things that we did right from the beginning, even before the program launched in Saskatchewan in 2007, was our industry created a made in Canada industry-led standard that made sure that any of the devices that our programs were collecting were going to be treated properly, so that the data was going to be wiped, that the health and safety of the workers that were collecting, transporting, and finally processing the materials were going to be respected, and made sure that we had the highest health and safety standards as possible, to make sure stuff wasn't exported, and to really try to drive our processors to do a good job in terms of returning as much of the material back into the supply chain. So under EPRA, we did create the Recycler Qualification Office, where we have auditors that go. The processors have to prove first at the outset that they can meet the electronics recycling standard, but then, you know, trust but verify is the common nomenclature we use, and so we're very much using the Recycler Qualification Office to get out there and to work with the processors to verify that they are doing the right things and that they are re-audited every couple of years. We've now moved into working with the internationally recognized R2 standard, and that's the very first step in verification. That provides the blanket standard of which our processors have to meet, and we really feel good about that. The R2 standard just was updated and refreshed. The version 3 came out and is now available as of July 1st, and there'll be a 2 or 3 year period by which we'll get all of our processors up to that standard, to that version 3, and it does a really good job in terms of being robust around data protection and other things. So at the end of the day, as I said, our processes through the ERS, the Electronic Recycling Standard, really promote sound environmental management practices, the worker health and safety controls, are a really robust data security approach, and making sure that there's downstream accountability. It's not just the folks that do the initial disassembly. It does really filter down right through all of our processes. I'll talk now about the third group that we think is important from a harmonization perspective, and that's the key performance indicators. So this is from our 2019 annual report. It's actually from Galen's program page in that annual report, and it's 2 pages. And I'm going to go over what we believe are the key performance indicators, and I'll give you a link to this annual report when we're done here. So the first of all is the collection. So, you know, in Saskatchewan in 2019, we collected over 2,400 metric tons of electronics, and that comes in somewhere around 2.2 kilograms per capita. The weight-based thing is a very interesting one from a key performance indicator. Because of some of the trends we're seeing with those devices in terms of lightweighting and consolidation of the kind of features, I think we can do 120% effort every year, better effort every year, and our weight is going to drop just because the footprint and the size and the amount of plastic, unfortunately, being used sometimes in electronics is increasing. So that's one we're going to keep an eye on. We're going to continue to promote and push for as much collection as we can, but we think overall that tonnage number is going to drop. And we've seen this in US programs, we've seen this happen in Europe, and we're seeing it happen in Canada across the board. Accessibility, I talked about that, the fact that you need to make collection convenient for Canadians, and so we do track that. So 93% of the Saskatchewan population was within 50 kilometers. If you're in a rural community, and much closer for an urban community, and we have over 95 different collection sites right across the province. Awareness is important. We've got 89% of the population in Saskatchewan that are aware of the fact that we do have a new recycling program. And participation, we've got over 700 manufacturers, retailers, and other industry stewards that are obligated under the regulation participating in our program. And then, of course, cost. We always keep an eye on cost. So those key performance indicators we publish every year in our annual reports. And you can go and look at your own different provincial program and see how you're doing as we move those forward. Program financing, probably one of the more controversial areas. Our belief is for a true extended producer responsibility approach that's industry-led, the financing mechanism should, the regulation should remain silent on program financing. So across the board, our industry has chosen the use of a visible environmental handling fee. Other industries have also done this in a number of different areas. But for us, it's proved to be a very stable revenue stream for us that allows us to make sure that we have a program that's accessible, convenient, and responsible right across the board. It allows us to address that all brands and orphan products are accommodated. It allows for the business to decision to determine the best place in the supply chain for the environmental handling fee to be remitted. We try not to get into that, allow the environmental handling fee to be remitted throughout the supply chain, and it's up to the industry to do that. There's some fairly complex relationships between retailers, manufacturers, etc. And the funding, we think, is done in a clear and transparent manner that we use definitely to educate consumers about the environmental costs of further purchases. And I really do believe it allows for a harmonized approach right across the board. And then finally is steward reporting. We have a single reporting system. We call it 3R. It stands for Register, Report, Remit. And that's a single national portal for all 7,500 of our obligated stewards. And they're able to come in and report on whatever programs that they're active in, wherever they're distributing product and they're regulated in a simple and comprehensive manner. And it allows all 9 of our programs to do that along with those stewards in the Yukon. So at the end of the day, I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to do. I have a colleague in the US, a gentleman by the name of Jason Linnell, who works for the National Center for Electronics Recycling, does a similar job to what I do up here. He's got a much harder decision or process to deal with. In the US, only 25 of 50 states have been regulated, whereas we've got regulations now in every jurisdiction in Canada except for Nunavut. The models and the mix of obligated products and the different financing schemes are all almost completely different, whereas we have very much a shared industry-led program. We've got harmonized product definitions, recycling standards, all those sort of things. So, I think we're the envy actually of Jason and some of the folks that are in the US. Just a final note that we do have our annual report out now. It came out just the end of last month. We actually were able to win an award as a best practice example for not-for-profit reporting by the Chartered Professional Accountants Association of Canada. So if you go to epra.ca and look for About Us, you'll see that that annual report is accessible and available to you. And that's it for my presentation, Colin.
Great, thanks a lot, Jay. And we are running a tiny bit behind, but I think we can just sort of overflow into the networking time, because following this, there's a presentation, there's networking time, and I sure we're getting a lot of good questions in, and I don't want to shorten Nazir at all on his time. So if everyone can just stick around a little past 2, that would be great. And I will just pass it over to Nazar now.
Thank you, Colleen, and thanks Joanne for giving me this opportunity to present on the single-use plastic ban here in the city of Prince Albert. Let me begin with that. We have a very environment-friendly city here, and especially the council, and they were always talking about the plastic bag bans. So what initiated it? The council requested the administration to prepare a report regarding the plastic bag ban in the city of Prince Albert. So the administration prepared the report, and the report went to Planning Advisory Committee in September 2019. In October 2019, the same report went to the City Council, and the bylaw was drafted in October 2019. On December 2019, first and second reading was done to the bylaw, and the third reading of the bylaw was done in January 2020. In January 2020 bylaw was got into effect, and we were supposed to be implementing the bylaw August the 1st. That was supposed to be next month, and because of the COVID-19, the fines enforcement were originally, they were set up to take effect August 1st, 2020. However, the ban has been suspended until the province of Saskatchewan's COVID-19 state of emergency is declared over. So we are waiting for that. Otherwise, we were ready, and the city were ready. The grocery store were ready across the city for this single-use plastic bag ban. Why the city of Prince Albert bans plastic bags? I think I should bring my single-use plastic bags pollute public places. It litter our streets, threaten wildlife, contribute to the climate crisis, released toxic chemicals in the landfill. Plastic bags are filling our landfill, and it also contribute to litter, contaminate land, waterways, and storm drains. I would talk about statistic a little bit here. So we emit 1.8 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year in Canada. That by 2050 there will be more plastic bags, more plastics than marine life in the ocean. According to the city of Calgary, the most plastic bags are used for less than 20 minutes, but take hundreds of years to break down. There are 90% decrease in plastic litter after plastic bags were banned in the region of Wood Buffalo. Johnson Shioma, a graduate school of public policy of University of Saskatchewan, indicates that only 9% of plastic bags are recycled, 12% bags are incinerated, and 79% are landfill are thrown into the environment. Sorry, my communication with the stakeholders and partners. So the city of Prince Albert had communication with the stockholders and the partners. So Retail Council of Canada, we were in contact with them. Canadian Surf Rider Organization, fact sheets were mailed to the businesses and residents regarding this plastic bag ban. Tips for resident, tips for businesses were also mailed, and there was talked to them, and they were aware of the tips and for the businesses and for the residents. We also got some help from Surf Rider with the plastic bag ban bylaw. Posters were also prepared, and 10 cards for businesses were also prepared with the help of the partners. The city conducted an online survey, and this was the highest survey response the city has ever received, with 75% residents suggested to proceed with a single-use plastic bag ban in the city. There are some exemptions in this ban. So the exemptions, I will talk about the exemptions, so what the exemption will be carried on. So carrying fruits and vegetables, plastic bag can be used for these, for carrying fruits and vegetables. Containing fresh or frozen meat, poultry, or fish products, whether packaged or not. Containing bulk food items or bulk hardware items. Freshly prepared bakery items or other food items that are not pre-packed. Wrap flowers and potted plants. Clothes immediately following professional laundry or dry cleaning. Newspaper or printed material intended to be left at the customer's residence or place of business. Flexible, reusable, resealable, rectangular zipper storage bags, usually mainly transparent and made of polyester or similar plastic, and used for foodstuffs such as sandwiches and freezer storage that are sold in packages of multiple bags. Garbage or trash bags, often used in residences and places of business, to contain solid waste in order to prevent the insides of waste containers from becoming coated in waste material that are sold in packages of multiple bags. Also, the fresh to transport of live fish. There are also a penalty for offenses. For individual, first offense will carry $100. The second offense will be a $200, and the third offense will be up to $500 for individual. Corporation will be, first offense will be $500. The second offense will be $1,000, and the third offense up to $10,000. We also got a sponsorship, and there were sponsorship opportunities also with this plastic bag ban. So North Central Saskatchewan Waste Management Corporation, they pledged that they will be providing each household in the city with one reusable bag to sponsor the city reusable grocery bag initiative. The city is still very much ready to implement single-use plastic bag bans, but like I mentioned, that we will be waiting for that emergency to be lifted, and then the city is ready to implement this bag. So this is my presentation about the plastic bag ban. Like I mentioned, the deadline of August 1st has been moved to a further notice. So we'll see, when the left is emergency state is lifted, then we will see, and we will come up with another date to implement this change. That was my presentation, and I will take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nazir. We do have quite a few questions that have been typed into the chat box. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go through them in the order that they were typed in. And then if you think of any additional questions, just add them in and we'll get to them at the end. So I think the first ones are actually for Bree. Everyone likes to check out what's going on in the province. So we've got a couple of questions about products that weren't included in the HHW regulations. One was smoke detectors, and the other is nicotine and vaping products.
For smoke detectors, we didn't include them. I noticed that the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission says that they're not considered hazardous waste and that they can actually just be disposed of in your normal garbage. And for
Okay.
vaporizers, I think those might be more considered a small appliance. We are considering expanding the electronics regulations in the future. Like we just did the phase 3 one a couple of years ago, but we're always considering expanding it to potentially include small appliances in the future. But that could be something that we would consider at that time.
Okay, great. And then there is a question about financial assistance for household hazardous waste events. I can let you talk if you want, or I can step back from a moderator role and answer on behalf of product here, whichever you prefer.
If you wanted to provide the answer, I think you probably are more familiar with the very small details of the PSP than I am.
Okay, sure. So here I am changing hats. So I guess what I can say is that we are looking, once the program's in place, people purchasing this material will be paying an electronic handling fee, which will be used to fund the program. So really there isn't necessarily a role for the province. The idea is that industry pays for this. Industry meaning industry often passes it on to consumers, but it's not borne by the entire tax base. Then it's borne by those people who choose to buy those products. So we're, as part of our implementation, we are working through sort of the financial model that we could provide to anyone with a depot or having events, so that's where the funding would come from. And I guess what I can say is that if, once things are going, if you have an event, we would likely pay for the cost of any of the program materials that are collected at that event, like we do right now with paint. If you have an HHW event and you're collecting paint, we pay for the processing of any paint that's collected. So we're taking that off the tax roll and adding it into our normal processing program. So the one thing to note, though, is that not everything that is collected typically at a collection event in Saskatchewan is a program item. So we need to make sure, so if you're collecting light ballasts, for example, they're not a program item, so that would still be on your cost. So it's really up to individual communities what they choose to have on their accepted list for their events. And then I guess back to Bree, or possibly Bree. Has the province, and I guess this would maybe tie more into the work you're doing with the federal government, is there any consideration of developing law to prohibit the exportation of waste?
Not that that's not something that we're currently working on. I think that would be more of a federal priority than a provincial priority. I don't think I really have enough information to be able to speak to that at this time.
Yeah, and I know Galen has provided some response in the chat too about the Basel Convention, but I don't know, Jay, if you wanted anything else you wanted to add on that from the electronics perspective.
Yeah, and Galen did provide a good answer there. So Canada is a signatory to the Basel Convention, and so there are ongoing and I would say expanding rules around the exportation of hazardous waste to non-OECD nations. I'd say two things from our perspective. One is our initial standard actually predated the federal government actually preventing that way. So we actually had provisions right within our industry-led standard prior to the federal government passing their regulations. So that's there now. And the other reason that we do downstream accountability is the US is not a signatory to the Basel Convention. So we have to prevent electronics from going down into the US and then over to a non-OECD country directly. And that's why we do downstream accountability and tracking because our standard prevents that. So yeah, it's a tricky issue and one that we hope Environment Canada will put some more resources on enforcement because I think it's needed for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for that, Jay. Sorry, just going through some additional questions here. Some of them are just comments. Oh, sorry, just bear with me. Oh, another question for Brianne. You get a bonus for the most questions. It's from Bert Weichel. Brianne, thanks for the great presentation. The provincial strategy is a good start. Can you comment on what we might do for the other half of the journey beyond 2040 to the end goal of a waste-free Saskatchewan?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I'm sure as time goes on, we will continually review the strategy and just continue to advance it as much as we can. I think the idea is eventually to have zero plastic waste, like the CCME zero plastic waste strategy, but we would have to review it at, well, not at 2040, but closer to 2040 and decide what we're going to do at that time. But I think the end goal is zero plastic waste.
Okay, great, thanks. And I think this is for you too. From Peter, we still have to deal with the back actors in the industry. It might be a neighbor that dumps his waste or a company that wants to cut corners. We should take steps to fix our own waste rather than ship it somewhere. I guess that's a comment, but I don't know if you wanted to reply to that at all.
Yeah, we should definitely be keeping waste as close as we can, manage it here instead of shipping it overseas. But yeah, I don't know if I can add any more to that.
Okay, some of these are just sort of redundant, so I'm just going to move along here. Nazar, you get a question. On the plastic bag bans, shouldn't this be a provincial-led initiative versus an ad hoc system where differences would be created from jurisdiction to jurisdiction? I recognize the intent, but a provincial strategy would be much more effective. I guess, Bree, if you wanted to add anything to Nazar's comments, you can do that after he replies.
Yeah, I think it should be a provincial thing, and it should be enforced by a province.
We've had that question come up a few times. We're not looking to regulate it at this time. So far in Canada, it's been the kind of the purview of municipalities to decide whether or not they want to ban plastic bags or not. The CCME is doing a lot of work on single-use and disposable plastics in creating a list of priority items that would be managed or banned or changed, but we're working with them a lot on that. So there might be stuff that comes out at a federal level in the next year or so. But at this time, the provincial government is not banning or regulating plastic bags.
Here from Rod Johnson. It's nice to see a couple more geographers on there, Rod and Bert. In your presentation, there was an educational component. Is there any part that addressing the real issue, which is consumption, any part of that being the circularity required and to simply reduce? I believe that was about, yeah, I think that's to you again, Bree. Yeah, definitely win the award.
I'm not sure if that's in relation to HHW regulations or the strategy. There is quite a bit of commitments in the strategy that's focused around education. We're not entirely sure what that would look like yet, but we do want to make sure that people use the waste hierarchy the way it's meant to be used, and reduction in waste would come first. But I think that comes with a lot more education just to the general public, and so that's something that we'd be working towards, but we haven't determined what that kind of education would look like right now.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, I don't see any more questions popping in, so thank you everyone for attending. I'm supposed to thank Product Care, which seems a little self-serving, but thank Product Care for sponsoring the session.